Chapter 3.
I didn't think anything could get inside the TARDIS,
Tegan had argued. Ordinarily, no, agreed the doctor. He regarded Nyssa with a look of consternation. But in this case, I think it could be something rather extraordinary. Tell me about the dream again, Nyssa. The nightmare, you mean? Said Nyssa. Her voice trembled slightly. Traken? The doctor leant closer. Specifically the thing in the dark. The thing you couldn't quite see. Tegan said,
I thought we'd been through this already. Can't you see she's upset, Doctor?
She had suffered the nighttime heebie-jeebies on many occasions during her sojourn on Earth. Mostly bad dreams featuring serpents and jungles and caves and the like, which she had simply put down to her experience on Devaloka. Apparently, oblivious to Tegan's reservations, Nyssa continued. It really wasn't like a dream at all. There was definitely something or someone in the room with me in the shadows. I got out of bed and followed it into the darkness. I didn't want to, but I had to. Some kind of compulsion, I suppose. It seemed so cold and dark, like the space between galaxies, empty and merciless. Tegan hugged herself and shivered at the thought. The cheerful brightness of the console room had become harsh and clinical. And then what? The doctor prompted softly. Nyssa drew a deep breath.
As I said, the lights came on in my room, and it was empty. There was no one there, but there had been. Doctor, I'm convinced of it. You must believe me.
The doctor was frowning. You're saying something actually manifested itself in the TARDIS? Nyssa shrugged helplessly.
But Tegan's right, surely. It's not possible for something to penetrate the real-world interface, is it?
No, replied the doctor confidently, unless, of course, it found another way in.
Such as?
Your mind. Tegan looked confused.
The dream?
Not quite. The doctor turned and fixed her with a sudden piercing stare. Do you recall the fault in the telepathic circuits? Tegan nodded.
I thought it just blew a fuse or something.
Psionic feedback, I said. Something was trying to force its way past the TARDIS defenses.
Using my mind?
Nyssa sounded appalled, but the notion seemed to galvanize her. Tegan could tell Nyssa's brain was already working through the consequences with her customary logic, shrugging aside the earlier panic. The doctor was nodding vigorously as he paced around the console room. Your subconscious mind, to be precise, probably while you were asleep.
But all this occurred when I woke up from the nightmare, which is right when the telepathic circuits went pfft, realized Tegan.
Yes, said the doctor thoughtfully, leaning on the console. Whatever it was must have hitched a ride from your dream state, Nyssa. How interesting.
But what could do that?
Tegan sounded alarmed.
Is it still here?
Very unlikely. The short circuit would have prevented any real temporal incursion. But it might be possible to trace the original telepathic signal. The doctor began to operate the controls on the panel in front of him, his face a sudden mask of concentration. Tegan felt the old, familiar tingle of excitement in her stomach, part fear, part anticipation. But this time, she decided she was going to be ready for it. She was going to help. Of course, the doctor was saying as his fingers traveled across the console. It might be a bit tricky with a system malfunction, but Nyssa, try initiating a repair program, would you? Instantly, Nyssa stepped up to the opposite side of the console and began operating the switches. Tegan felt a minute prickle of envy, watching them work together like a team. It was almost as if Nyssa had become the doctor's assistant. But then, Nyssa had a strong science background, which Tegan supposed must be an advantage.
The fault locator won't identify the relevant subroutines for a repair program, complained Nyssa.
The doctor hesitated, then said, Never mind, we'll try a shortcut. He hurried around to join her. If I can tap into the residual energy in the telepathic circuits, the TARDIS might be able to calculate the exact point of origin.
Won't that be dangerous?
No more than leaving whatever it was that tried to invade the TARDIS via your dream free to try again.
But you'll have to link directly with the TARDIS telepathic circuits. I thought they were damaged, protested Tegan.
Nyssa said,
It's a terrible risk.
Nonsense, the doctor declared. All I have to do is tune my thought waves into the TARDIS Autron signature, and, He placed the flats of his hands onto two metallic plates located on one of the console panels, and then closed his eyes.
"I don't like the sound of this," said Tegan flatly. "What's he trying to do?"
Nyssa examined the various readouts and displays before her.
"He's trying to align the TARDIS telepathic processor unit to the coordinate panel. If he can—"
There was a violent crackle like a firework going off, and the doctor jerked back from the console, hitting the wall behind him heavily. There, he slid down until he lay sprawled across the floor. Tegan ran and knelt down by him. He looked pale and stunned, but otherwise unhurt.
"Is he all right?" asked Nyssa. "He's out cold. What happened?"
They looked back at the control console, where wisps of smoke were drifting from the telepathic circuits. As they watched, the glass column at the center of the console began to slow in its rhythmic movement.
"The TARDIS is materializing."
The central column came to a rest with a soft chime. For a moment, all they could hear was the gentle hum of the TARDIS around them.
"We've landed."
"The question is," said Tegan, "where?"
The doctor reached out to touch the cave wall. "Curious rock structure. Is it crystalline?" "Not quite, although you'd be forgiven for thinking so," Stoker said. The rock was smooth and glass-like, black but with a hint of deeper, darker green. It had an almost organic quality that Stoker still found unsettling.
"I think we're the first human beings to set foot on Akoshemon's moon," she went on.
"It's still a bit of a closed book. What are you looking for?" Stoker hadn't been expecting such an abrupt change of subject, so she paused just long enough to take another drag of her cigar before answering. "Fortune and glory. Isn't that what they say? Fortune and glory. Straight to the point," admitted the doctor, "but hardly informative." They were walking back through the cave system, away from the area where the explosion had occurred. The air was a little better here, but it had the dank, enclosed smell of compacted soil and granite the galaxy over. There were electric lights fixed to the glossy walls of the passages connecting the main caves, bright and yellow, but horribly unflattering. Everyone instantly gained a pasty, sick-looking complexion. "Somewhere inside the rock is the remains of forgotten civilization," Stoker told the doctor. "I'm hoping to dig up something very, very old and valuable, or something very, very pretty and valuable, but preferably both. And therefore doubly valuable. You got it." Stoker's men were busy in the ancillary cavern, moving heavy equipment in storage crates. There were only 5 of them, and all but one was human. The doctor glanced at Vega Jal and then turned back to look at Stoker. "Forgotten civilization? There won't be much left except dust and bones, maybe a few trinkets. Something that can give us an inkling of the kind of people who used to live in these parts." "When you put it like that, it doesn't sound very lucrative," the doctor commented. "Depends on what you're interested in," said Stoker. She stubbed out the cigar against the rock wall. "My sponsors just love bones and dust and old trinkets. They'd have to. This looks like a very difficult operation. You're a long way from any major star system, and there are no obvious signs of any ancient civilization that I've noticed, and—" She stopped him with a look that was cool and impenetrable as the stone that surrounded them. "And?" The doctor met her stare levelly. "And I've never met an archaeologist yet who preferred high explosives to patient work with a trowel and a brush." Stoker gave an irritated snort. "You ask a lot of questions." "I'm just curious. Lucky you're not a cat, then." Stoker turned and called out to one of her men. "Hey, Bunny!" Bunny Cheung turned, and Stoker beckoned to him. The non-human with the owl-like eyes and sharp features followed Bunny over. "Our new friend here doesn't believe this is an archaeological dig," Stoker told him. Bunny grinned. "What does he think we're doing here?" "I'm not sure. Holiday, perhaps?" "You are using high explosives," the doctor pointed out. "Or had you forgotten how we came to meet in the first place?" "Maybe you think we're gun runners or something," smirked Stoker. "Smugglers, pirates, terrorists even." "We have the necessary credentials," said Bunny Cheung. He reached into a wide pouch on his left hip and produced a colored plastic document. This gives us authority from the Department of Alien Antiquities at the University of Tyr itself.
We're here to uncover the secrets of the Akoshemon system.
The doctor flipped through the permit and handed it back. I beg your pardon. Please forgive me, but I'm still a little confused. Probably a touch of shell shock, I expect. Stoker eyed him carefully. He was hiding something behind all the courtesy. She was about to say something when the doctor turned to Vega Jal and started talking to him in a strange, fluting dialect, punctuated by clicks. Jal replied in kind, inclining his head politely, almost deferentially, to the doctor. "What was all that about?" asked Stoker. Her irritation with the doctor had given way to bemusement. "I was introducing myself properly to Vega Jal here. That is, to give him the correct form of address, of course. The people of Vega have a venerable tradition of honor and respect for proper names." Stoker glanced at Jal. "Do they really?" "Oh, yes," the doctor said. "You've been to Vega, then?" "Actually, no." "You spoke to him like a native. I've a flair for languages." "That might come in useful if we hit on any ancient hieroglyphics or runes." "Is that likely?" Stoker shrugged. "Who knows? We're still digging." They moved off, the doctor following Stoker again, leaving Vega Jal and Bunny to carry on with their work. There was some muted conversation among the men behind them, and a burst of laughter. "It must be very useful having a Vegan on your team," said the doctor. "Vega has produced more mining engineers and potholers than practically any other planet in the galaxy. Just the thing for an archaeological dig." "You said it." The doctor stopped her with a touch on her arm. "By the way," he said, "apology accepted." "What?" "For nearly blowing us all sky high. You did say sorry when you first found us, but I was a little busy at the time." He flashed a smile, not to mention slightly deaf. Stoker let the tension go, her shoulders visibly sagging. "It's okay. Let's forget all about it. Sorry for snapping like that back there, but..." She let the sentence hang, finishing it in her head. "I'm a little jumpy right now." He was looking at her again, in that way slightly guileless, but somehow sharp as a laser. "But," he prompted, unwilling to let it drop. Stoker took a breath. "It's just this place, I suppose," she replied, waving a hand at the glossy green rock surrounding them. "It's pretty grim down here." The doctor nodded, frowning slightly as he stuck his hands into his pockets. "It's pretty grim on the surface, too, I seem to recall." The TARDIS had materialized in the shade of an enormous outcrop of rock, some 40 feet high and half as wide. The jagged stone surface was the color of putrescent meat, coated with some kind of mold or lichen. Nyssa was examining the growth minutely, and Tegan thought she must have been trying to conceal her anxiety with calm scientific interest in her new surroundings. "The whole moon appears to be covered in this lichen," Nyssa observed. "I suppose something must account for its atmosphere." The air was thin but breathable, and uncomfortably cool. Watching her breath steam in the air, Tegan said, "No other sign of life, at any rate." "And yet," Nyssa sounded troubled. "What?" "I have the distinct feeling we're being watched." Automatically they looked skyward. Looking down on them like a giant bloodshot eye was the planet, a bloated mass of churning scarlet and black. It was both strangely compelling and utterly repellent. The scabrous colors swirled across the surface in volcanic torment, and it looked to Tegan as though nothing natural or good could exist there. Repulsed, she looked away. The doctor stood some distance from the TARDIS, hands in trouser pockets, Panama hat perched on his head, for all the world looking like someone expecting to attend a garden regatta. His white trainers had left a track of footprints in the crusty sand. "Feeling better?" Tegan asked him, folding her arms. It was definitely a bit chilly. "I suffered a tremendous psychic blast, Tegan," he said without looking at her. The eyes beneath the brim of his hat were fixed on the horizon. It wasn't that far away. The moon seemed quite small. The doctor had come round in the console room pretty quickly, jumping to his feet with unlikely vigor. He shrugged off Nyssa's concerns and Tegan's offer of a stiff drink. Instead, after glancing at the stationary time rotor, he had simply unfurled his Panama hat and flicked the console lever down. Now Tegan was struggling to think of something useful to say.
Breathe deeply and
relax. Yes, I know.
Sorry, just wanted to help, that's all.
In that case, tell me what you see. I want to make sure my perceptions haven't been interfered with. Tegan pulled a face and then examined the scene around her once more. The mold-colored plain was dotted with huge thrusting rocks, jagged as knives. The crag the TARDIS had landed next to was one of the smaller ones. It looked as though the whole moon was covered with them. And it was a smallish moon. Right enough, she even fancied she could see the curve of the horizon, and up beyond that, outer space. For a long moment, Tegan simply stared at it, and she noticed the Doctor was doing the same. Even he seemed impressed. Beyond the blood-red planet, the sky was split in two. One half was a great wash of color, blue and purple, and burgundy speckled with a million stars. Tegan knew that every star was a distant sun, and for a second she felt a dizzying sense of vertigo as the scale of what she saw hit home. So insignificant, she thought. She switched her attention to the other half of the sky, which was complete absence of color, total blackness. There were no stars, however distant, just a void of unremitting darkness. She shivered.
What's out there?
She asked the Doctor. Her breath wisped away on the cold breeze. Nothing, said the Doctor bleakly. Well, nothing until you reach the next galaxy. That, Tegan, is intergalactic space, the empty void separating the galaxies.
It's awesome. It's so empty. It's creepy.
Whereas that, the Doctor gestured to the sparkling luminescence on the other side of the sky, is full of life and light and energy. The galaxy that this world belongs to, seen in all its glory.
And the planet?
I doubt there's anything much alive there, but you never know. We must be on the very edge of the star system, observed Nyssa as she joined them. Yes, agreed the Doctor. The last planet before the void.
Why did the TARDIS bring us here?
Wondered Tegan. Nyssa was staring out into the pitch black of empty space. It's like my dream. So cold and merciless. Abysmal.
Oh, I don't know, said Tegan. It's kind of scary and exciting. Like reaching the top of the roller coaster.
No, said the Doctor. Nyssa meant what she said. Abysmal, bottomless, immeasurable depth. The edge of nothing but primal chaos. Can you feel it too? Asked Nyssa, her voice wavering. She pulled the collar of her jacket tighter. The Doctor nodded. It's here, somewhere close, waiting, impatient.
What is?
Demanded Tegan. Nyssa said, the thing that came to me in the TARDIS.
You can both sense it? Now you're really giving me the willies. Why don't we just go?
There's no point, said the Doctor. It would find us wherever we went.
What? How?
It came to me while we were in the space-time vortex, remember? Explained Nyssa. It wouldn't matter where we tried to go, if it can find us in the vortex.
Right, that's it,
Tegan declared.
Let's find this thing, whatever it is, and get rid of it.
But neither the Doctor nor Nyssa seemed to be listening. They were both staring up into the darkness. And it was then that the ground had exploded beneath their feet.